Hello, I'm Yonova. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Ukraine's parliament has passed a new anti-corruption bill rolling back a law enacted earlier this month that provoked domestic protests and an international backlash owing to fears that it was watering down the country's efforts to battle against graft. Now, fighting against corruption is never an easy task, especially during wartime. Nevertheless, the question remains, what was President Zelenskyy's idea behind the initial bill? And what made him backtrack from it? This is what we're going to be exploring today, here on Eastern Express.
Ukraine's parliament passed a law which restores independence to the country's leading anti-corruption institutions. The document was also signed by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The decision was welcomed by various international institutions. They had been critical of the Ukrainian leadership's decision to pass an earlier law, which was seen as a strike against the aforementioned institutions.
The Rada has restored key safeguards ensuring the independence of the anti-corruption bodies. In our view, the new law addresses the key challenges of NABU and SAPO's independence.
The two institutions in question, NABU and SAPO, are at the forefront of Ukraine's efforts to purge corruption. This is one of the key conditions for the country to join the European Union. Many ordinary Ukrainians dream of joining the bloc, as to them it is a chance to protect the country from Russian control and give them a future as part of the European community, which is why protests had broken out in response to what people saw as an attack against NABU and SAPO. This time Zelenskyy assures things will be different.
The text of the draft law has been discussed with partners, law enforcement agencies and representatives of the NABU and SAPO.
For now, as far as the anti-corruption laws go, the situation has settled in Ukraine. Yet according to many observers, voters' perception of President Zelenskyy's government has suffered a serious blow, one from which the government may not fully recover.
Now, Ukraine has been grappling with corruption for many years. Agencies such as the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, or NABU, are meant to help resolve this issue. Here is more on why a perceived threat to their independence angered so many Ukrainians.
NABU, established between 2014 and 2015 along with the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, or SAPO, and other institutions are crucial when it comes to fighting high-level corruption in Ukraine. The Bureau goes not only after minor cases of corruption, but has also leveled charges against high-ranking officials, though the success rate of these cases has varied due to the issues plaguing Ukraine's judicial system. Fighting corruption is extremely important to Ukrainians, as it is one of the main conditions for joining the European Union. The bloc is seen as one of the ways for Ukraine to have some semblance of post-war security. Many Ukrainian voters are also exhausted by the high levels of corruption within Ukraine's institutions and offices, which affect not only the country's international perception, but also the everyday lives of ordinary people, which is why there was a public outcry when the parliament passed a law that essentially made Ukraine's leading anti-corruption institutions subordinate to the government and the prosecutor general. This meant that bodies responsible for fighting high-level corruption answered to the same people they could be investigating in potential cases.
And now, as always, it's time to explore the issue in greater detail. Over the past decade, Ukraine has undergone a remarkable transformation. In 2013, Transparency International ranked it among the most corrupt countries in Europe, scoring just 25 out of 100 on the Corruption Perceptions Index. But by 2023, that score had climbed to 36. It's not a revolution, but it is a clear trajectory. Now, the change didn't come out of nowhere. After the 2014 Maidan revolution, Ukraine began building an anti-corruption infrastructure nearly from scratch. It established NABU, an National Investigative Bureau, a Special Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office, and even a dedicated High Court. Civil society, free media, and Western partners pushed hard for accountability. But the war with Russia has complicated that progress somewhat. Now, wartime conditions have created fertile ground for corruption. Emergency defense contracts, reduced oversight, and billions in foreign aid have all introduced new risks and challenges. In 2023, a major scandal involving food procurement for soldiers triggered high-level resignations. Still, Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies kept functioning and even scored convictions. However, in late July this year, that credibility was suddenly called into question. Ukraine's parliament passed, and President Zelenskyy signed, a controversial law that placed anti-corruption agencies under the Prosecutor General's control. The backlash was swift. Protests erupted. EU officials warned that financial aid could be suspended. Within days, the law was reversed, independence restored, damage partially repaired. Now, European leaders welcomed the U-turn, but the episode exposed just how fragile reform progress remains and how tightly Ukraine's Western future is tied to its internal integrity. EU membership is not just about geography, it is about values, institutions, and public trust. In wartime, corruption doesn't pause. In fact, it adapts and sometimes accelerates. Ukraine is fighting a two-front war, one against an external aggressor and one against the ghosts of its past. Whether it wins both may well define its future in Europe. And joining us now to shed more light on the issue is Maria Yonova, Ukrainian MP representing the Petro Poroshenko bloc. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
So let's begin with the vote concerning this controversial piece of legislation, which in the end was reversed. Can you tell us more about how events unfolded in Ukrainian parliament as these legislative changes were being put to the vote?
Mm-hmm. Of course, the yesterday day was it's for our faction, European Solidarity, really concerned because the whole parliament had to correct the mistake of the government of the president of Zelenskyy. And recent actions by the office of the president of Ukraine aimed at undermining the independence of key anti-corruption institution. And it's really about National Anti-Corruption Bureau, and it's also about the specialized anti-corruption prosecutor office. Why I can tell you about this such concern, because in previous convocation in the parliament, together with President Poroshenko, we have been created together with our international partner, the anti-corruption infrastructure. And we know our obligations, and of course it's about democratic, capable institution for our country, which is really now under the threat and under bombarding by Russia Federation, who is absolutely not the democracy. And that is why have triggered a swift of unquote response from Ukrainian civil society. And of course, we appreciate that the international partners were also very vocal. And I think that this reaction appears to have been unexpected and politically unsettling for the authorities. So yesterday, yes, we have voted. It was more than 300 votes. And I think that one more time, Ukrainian civil society, Ukrainian nation, and of course, Ukraine's international partners, particularly the European Union, we had returned the competence and authorities to this anti-corruption institution, but not the all, I can tell you. You know that was a presidential draft law, and also there were alternative. We have also made our own law because we think that there are very important provisions should be also. It's about competition for prosecutors, as I think that it's really important to return the competition for prosecutors. Also, I think that our provision was extrajudicial, without a court decision, searches being allowed only in cases of really very serious physical injury, like violence, murder, or in case of bribery. And that is
so
why,
what you're saying that, you want to refine this legislation even further to introduce certain safeguards, right? But let's go back to why this legislation, the original controversial piece of legislation, was adopted in the first place. President Zelenskyy initially said that the reason for that was that the anti-corruption bodies were being infiltrated by the Russian intelligence. Was it not a legitimate concern, do you think?
First of all, of course, we're a young democracy and just created anti-corruptional institution. I can say that they were 100% capable and excellent, and but anyway, it was the reason and the excuses of the President Zelenskyy was not the real one, because I think that the actions of the president and his close associates risk sacrificing democratic principles, internal resilience, and national unity in favor, unfortunately, of securing their political future and avoiding accountability. And it's a pity for me to say, but again, it's not about National Anti-Corruption Bureau. It's really about capable institutions which we need to build and to make them independent according to our European criteria and obligations. And again, it's for our Ukrainian nation. It is absolutely necessary. And that is why for us, also for our faction, and I was blocking the tribune, the presidium, it was a key, and for also, as you have seen, the civil society, the young people, really to restore the independence of NABU and SAPO in line of really with European standards and commitments. Also, as you have asked me, because we also addressed to the president of Ukraine that press for immediate approval of the government decision to appoint a new head of the Bureau of Economic Security, selected through really independent and transparent process. Unfortunately, it wasn't done yesterday. And it's also one of the pillars which we have to implement for International Monetary Fund. And also to support a structural reset of the State Bureau of Investigation, because unfortunately it became such a repressive machine, and the reputation of this institution was compromised by really politically motivated prosecutions and its de facto subordination of the presidential office. For us, it's important to keep the independence of this anti-corruptional institutions, and that is why we urge the termination of the government control censorship-based TV marathon format, because when people will see in public what is going on and broadcasting independent TV, then the government will not do all that actions which they have made. And I think that the president of Ukraine, he didn't expect that such protest of young people who would like to live in European democratic country, that they will demand to stop, to close the European future. That is why
the response was overwhelming. That is true. But earlier on, you suggested that the reports coming out from Ukraine concerning the situation were somehow being interfered with by the government. Could you elaborate on that? Because what you said was essentially that there was some degree of censorship there.
Unfortunately, we have such a TV marathon which is controlled by the government, and we are asking, and it is a lot of paying attention even in the resolutions of European Parliament, that there should be to respect rights of opposition, freedom of speech, because, for example, some 3 channels also have been closed without any reason. So a lot of problematic questions we were trying to solve inside our country, not to be public with our international partners, because we understand that our brave armed forces are fighting and defending European democratic Ukraine. And unfortunately, the government, using the martial law, would like to, we have such authoritarian signals from the government. And that is why I think that the society has already showed that they will not allow any president to do this. And the current political momentum, wherein the authorities have signaled readiness to repair political damage and restore confidence, provides really an opportunity for Ukraine's partners to insist on really concrete steps to strengthen the rule of law, media freedom, anti-corruptional architecture, and democratic pluralism. And that is why I think that it was good that the society has showed that they will not swallow any autocratic signals, if I can say. And unfortunately, that was done, a lot of experts and journalists are saying, because this anti-corruptional institution, they have found and investigated some not good things for close friends of the president of Ukraine. So
could this be the reason? Some people are suggesting that this was the real reason behind this. Would you go as far as to say, yes, that was the main motivation there?
We feel and we see that the investigators are saying like this. Now, when we have returned the authorities to anti-corruption institution, that's their job to continue, and also, not to manipulate with a lot of cases, to work independently according to Ukrainian legislation, to European standards. And yes, we corruption should be also to delete by minimum from our country, especially in the sector of defense and security and defense, as really we need to supply and we need to provide all necessary things to our armed Ukrainian armed forces.
We are slowly running out of time. I've got one quick question. Do you think generally, given that Ukraine is a country at war, fighting against the Russian invasion and the Russian war crimes, would you say that despite this setback with this legislation, there is progress being made when it comes to the fight against corruption, which, as we've mentioned, is being conducted in wartime, so in the most difficult of conditions imaginable?
First of all, I think that was a lesson for President of Ukraine, that everyone, civil society, youth, our Ukrainian nation, our international partners, they see and knew the problems. Of course, they were not lightening that publicly, because really the real enemy and aggressor is Russia Federation. And I hope that this lesson will give the president an opportunity to fight and to implement and to make real independent anti-corruptional structure. And I think that this is also now time to have this in the parliament, to have coalition of national unity, check and balances, and to control the government. Because it is impossible that the president and his 5-6 managers are ruling the country. It's physically impossible, because democracy, it's about parliament, it's about independent law enforcement institutions, it's about civil society strong. So democracy, it's really also about strong subjective parliament. And that is why I think that we have shown that we can correct also the mistakes which have been done, unfortunately, by the government. But we have to do more and to correct the trust and sincere relations with our international partners. Because
so it's a constant struggle for the accountability of the authorities. Unfortunately, we have to park our conversation there. Maria Yonova was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insights.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has spoken with Poland's President-elect Karol Nawrocki via phone call. The conversation was described as a good one by the Ukrainian leader.
Ties between Poland and Ukraine were the main subject of the phone call which took place at Zelenskyy's request. The Ukrainian president said he had told Nawrocki about the most recent Russian attacks on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, and emphasized that Ukraine continues to count Poland among its reliable partners and allies. Nawrocki meanwhile reportedly said that Warsaw will continue to support Kyiv's defense efforts and called Russia a new imperial and colonial state. The two were also to have discussed historical policies pertaining to the Volhynia massacre, which remains a serious wound in relations between the two countries. Nawrocki's spokesperson said that the Polish president-elect called himself the voice of a nation that demands a change in Ukraine's approach to unresolved historical issues.
Russia and Syria are seeking to restart relations in the wake of the fall of the Assad regime. The country's foreign ministers have agreed to boost ties and review Assad-era agreements.
This marks the first time that a high-ranking Syrian official has visited Russia since the fall of the Assad regime. Moscow had been the strongest backer of Bashar al-Assad's government and heavily supported it during the Syrian civil war. Russia still holds pretty high stakes in the country, as the future of its two military bases located within Syrian territory remain uncertain. These bases were used by the Russians extensively during the conflict. Neither side officially mentioned whether the lease on the bases, which is to last until 2066, will be part of the agreement review. The Syrian foreign minister expressed interest in having Russia support the new Syrian government. In exchange, his Russian counterpart declared that Moscow is ready to help Syria rebuild after the war.
Mexican intelligence has warned Ukraine that individuals linked to drug cartels have been trying to infiltrate Ukraine's foreign legion. These volunteers are apparently trying to gain kamikaze drone combat experience.
According to the findings of the French investigative media outlet Intelligence Online, Ukraine's Security Service and Military Intelligence Directorate have set up a specialist unit which will launch an investigation into the claims. This will reportedly focus on Spanish-speaking volunteers from Colombia, Mexico, and several other Central and South American countries. Some of the people being investigated were introduced to Ukraine via private military companies based in their home countries, which in turn allowed them to avoid the usual background checks. Intelligence Online says that these persons signed up for one of Ukraine's drone academies, which train thousands of drone pilots, manufacturers, and engineers. Their intention is purportedly to become experts in the area of drone combat and to later use their knowledge in attacks on cartel rivals and domestic security forces in their home countries.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.